Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we begin today's attack report, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your support is very important to us, so please subscribe. Go ahead and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from, and click the like button. All of this because the crisp autumn air nipped at my face as I trudged deeper into the Adirondack wilderness. My backpack weighed heavily on my shoulders, filled with camping gear and enough supplies for a weekend getaway. I'd been planning this solo trip for months, eager to escape the chaos of New York City and reconnect with nature. As the sun began its descent, I found the perfect clearing to set up camp. The surrounding pines towered above me, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. I dropped my pack with a satisfying thud and took a deep breath, savoring the earthy scent of the forest. Home, sweet home, I muttered to myself, a small smile playing on my lips. I got to work setting up my tent, the familiar routine bringing a sense of comfort. The repetitive motions of hammering stakes and threading poles helped quiet the lingering stress from the work week. Once the tent was secure, I unrolled my sleeping bag inside and arranged my gear. Stepping back, I admired my handiwork. The small orange dome stood out against the darkening forest, a beacon of civilization in the wilderness. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, though. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder more than usual. "Get it together, Mike," I chided myself. "You're just not used to being alone out here." Pushing the unease aside, I set about gathering firewood. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. By the time I had a respectable pile of kindling and larger logs, twilight had settled over the forest. I arranged the wood in a small pit I'd cleared, then struck a match. The flame caught quickly, and soon I had a cheerful fire crackling away. I sat back on a fallen log, warming my hands as I watched the flames dance. The peaceful moment was shattered by a sound that made my blood run cold. A howl, unlike anything I'd ever heard before, echoed through the trees. It started low and guttural, then rose to a piercing pitch that set my teeth on edge. I jerked upright, my eyes scanning the tree line. "What the hell was that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I'd heard coyotes before, even the occasional wolf howl on nature documentaries. But this was different. There was a rawness to it, a primal quality that spoke to something ancient and terrifying in the depths of my mind. The howl faded, leaving behind an unnatural silence. No crickets chirped, no owls hooted. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. I stood, moving closer to the fire. Its warmth and light offered little comfort as the shadows deepened around me. My eyes strained to pierce the darkness between the trees, imagining movement in every shifting shadow. "It's nothing," I said aloud, trying to convince myself. Probably just a coyote, or maybe someone's dog got loose. But deep down I knew that wasn't true. Whatever had made that sound was no ordinary animal. As full night descended, the feeling of being watched intensified. The firelight created a small bubble of visibility, but beyond that, the forest was an impenetrable wall of blackness. I couldn't shake the sensation of eyes boring into me from every direction. I paced around the campfire, my movements jerky and nervous. Every snapping twig or rustle of leaves had me spinning around, heart racing. The logical part of my brain tried to reason that it was just normal forest sounds, but instinct screamed that something was very, very wrong. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. My voice sounded small and frightened in the vast darkness. "Is anyone there?" Only silence answered. I don't know how long I stood there, muscles tense, straining to hear any sign of approach. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Just as I started to relax, convincing myself it was all in my head, a sharp crack split the night. I whirled around, nearly losing my balance. The sound had come from directly behind me, no more than a few yards away. My breath caught in my throat as I peered into the inky blackness beyond the firelight. For a moment I thought I saw something, a flash of yellow eyes, reflecting the firelight, a hulking shape, larger than any animal I'd ever encountered. But when I blinked, it was gone. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. "This isn't funny." Silence was my only reply, but the feeling of being stalked, of being hunted, intensified. My hands shook as I fumbled for my flashlight, flicking it on and sweeping the beam across the trees. The light caught nothing but leaves and branches, but I couldn't shake the certainty that something was out there, watching and waiting. A low growl rumbled through the clearing, so deep I felt it in my chest more than heard it. That was enough. Terror overrode any remaining shred of courage, and I bolted for my tent. I practically dove inside, zipping the entrance closed with trembling fingers. I knew the thin fabric offered no real protection, but it was better than nothing. Huddled in my sleeping bag, I clutched the flashlight like a lifeline. Throughout the night, strange noises surrounded my tent. Growls, snuffling sounds, the crack of breaking branches. Something circled my campsite, drawing ever closer. I lay frozen, barely daring to breathe, as heavy footfalls crunched through the leaf litter mere inches from where I lay. At one point, a massive shadow fell across the tent. I could see its outline through the fabric, backlit by the dying embers of my fire. It was huge, far larger than a man, with a distinctly canine shape. But no normal wolf ever stood on two legs like that. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a whimper, certain that any sound would trigger an attack. Tears streamed down my face as I silently prayed for morning to come. After an eternity, the shadow moved away. The sounds gradually faded, but sleep was impossible. I lay awake, every muscle tense, straining to hear any sign of the creature's return. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the trees, the forest slowly came back to life. Birds began to sing, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. But the memory of that howl, of those eyes in the darkness, was seared into my mind. I knew with absolute certainty that something was out there, something that shouldn't exist, and somehow I knew it wasn't done with me yet. With shaking hands, I unzipped the tent and peered out. The morning looked deceptively peaceful, with no sign of the terror that had stalked the night. But as I emerged, my blood ran cold. There, circling my campsite, were massive paw prints, far too large to belong to any normal wolf or dog. I stared at the tracks, my mind reeling. What I'd experienced was impossible, and yet the evidence was right there in front of me. As the sun climbed higher, I knew I had a choice to make. Pack up and flee, or try to uncover what was really going on in these woods. Little did I know, that decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change my life forever. I awoke with a start, my heart pounding as the events of the previous night came rushing back. Sunlight filtered through the tent fabric, and for a moment I convinced myself it had all been a terrible nightmare. But as I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, that fragile illusion shattered. My campsite was in complete disarray. The remnants of my fire were scattered, still smoldering logs strewn about. My backpack lay torn open, its contents spilled across the forest floor. But what truly chilled me to the bone were the tracks. Massive paw prints encircled my tent, each easily the size of my hand. They were canine in shape, but far too large for any wolf or dog I'd ever encountered. I crouched down, running my fingers along the edge of one print. The impression was deep, suggesting whatever made it was incredibly heavy. "This can't be real," I muttered, my voice shaky. I spent the next hour trying to salvage what I could of my supplies. As I worked, I debated my next move. The smart thing would be to pack up and get the hell out of these woods. But a nagging curiosity gnawed at me. What exactly had I encountered last night? Against my better judgment, I decided to do some exploring. I'd stick to the main hiking trails, I reasoned, and be back well before dark. Grabbing my water bottle and what was left of my trail mix, I set off into the forest. The morning was deceptively beautiful. Sunlight dappled the forest floor and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to me like a second skin. I'd been hiking for about an hour when a sickly sweet odor caught my attention. It was the unmistakable smell of decay, growing stronger as I moved forward. Rounding a bend in the trail, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, just off the path, lay the mangled carcass of a deer. I'd seen roadkill before, even animals taken down by predators. But this was something else entirely. The deer's body was torn open, its ribcage splayed wide, as if something had ripped it apart with inhuman strength. Deep gashes scored its flanks, far too large to have been made by normal claws. What struck me most was the precision of some of the wounds. This wasn't just an animal attack, but something that had known exactly where to strike. I approached cautiously, fighting back waves of nausea. What could have done this, I whispered, more to myself than anything. As I leaned in for a closer look, the forest around me fell unnaturally silent. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. It was as if someone had suddenly muted the world. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as an overwhelming sense of being watched washed over me. I straightened up slowly, my eyes scanning the underbrush. Nothing moved, but I could feel a presence. Something was out there, stalking me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" Silence was my only answer, but I knew I wasn't alone. My heart raced as I took a few tentative steps back towards the trail. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to move slowly, not wanting to trigger whatever was out there. A twig snapped somewhere to my left. I whirled towards the sound, my breath catching in my throat. For a split second, I saw something. A flash of matted fur, dirty gray-brown in color. And eyes, yellow eyes that gleamed with an unnatural intelligence. Terror froze me in place. The creature was massive, far larger than any wolf I'd ever seen. Its shoulders easily reached my chest, rippling with muscle beneath that shaggy coat. But it was the eyes that truly paralyzed me. They weren't the eyes of an animal, but something else. Something that radiated malevolence and hunger. Our gazes locked for what felt like an eternity, though it could only have been seconds. Then, with a low growl that I felt more than heard, it melted back into the shadows. That broke the spell. I turned and ran, no longer caring about stealth or caution. Blind panic drove me as I sprinted back the way I'd come, branches whipping at my face and arms. I could hear it behind me, heavy footfalls and panting breaths that seemed to be gaining ground with every second. The sound spurred me to run faster than I'd ever run before, my lungs burning as I gasped for air. "Help!" I screamed, though I knew there was no one around to hear. "Somebody, please!" I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately regretted it. The creature was there, bounding after me with impossible speed. Its jaws were open, revealing rows of gleaming teeth. I put on an extra burst of speed, my feet barely seeming to touch the ground. My campsite came into view, and I made a beeline for my tent. I knew it wouldn't offer any real protection, but my panic-addled brain saw it as my only refuge. Just as I reached the clearing, my foot caught on an exposed root. I went down hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Gasping, I rolled onto my back, certain I was about to feel those terrible jaws close around me. But the clearing was empty. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. I lay there for several minutes, too terrified to move, waiting for the attack that never came. Finally, I struggled to my feet, wincing at the scrapes and bruises from my fall. My eyes darted around the campsite, searching for any sign of the creature. There was nothing. No tracks, no broken branches, nothing to indicate I'd been chased by a monster straight out of a nightmare. "I'm losing my mind," I said aloud, my voice hoarse. "This can't be happening." But I knew what I'd seen. The deer carcass, those gleaming eyes, the sound of pursuit. It had all been real. And somehow I knew it wasn't over. With shaking hands, I began to gather my scattered belongings. I had to get out of these woods, had to tell someone what was happening here. But as I glanced at the lengthening shadows, a chill ran down my spine. My night was falling, and I had a sinking feeling that darkness was exactly what the creature was waiting for. I worked faster, shoving things haphazardly into my torn backpack. Whatever was out there, I couldn't let it catch me in the open again. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I retreated to my tent, zipping it closed as if that flimsy barrier could protect me from the horrors lurking in the forest. Huddled in my sleeping bag, I strained my ears for any sound of approach. The night stretched on, filled with strange noises and shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Sleep was impossible. Every snapping twig or rustle of leaves had me tensing, certain that this time, the attack would come. As I lay there, one thought kept circling through my mind. When dawn came, I had to get out of these woods. But a smaller, more insidious voice whispered that it might already be too late. The first light of dawn had barely begun to filter through the trees when I heard it. A low, menacing growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. My blood turned to ice as I realized the creature had returned. I didn't waste a second. Adrenaline surging through my veins, I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and grabbed my backpack. I didn't bother with the tent or any of my other gear. None of that mattered now. All that mattered was survival. As I burst out of the tent, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows. Yellow eyes gleamed with predatory intent, and I saw the massive shape of the beast emerging from the underbrush. Oh God, I panted, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned and ran, crashing through the forest with no regard for direction or stealth. Branches whipped across my face, leaving stinging scratches, but I barely felt them. The thundering of my heart and the ragged sound of my own breathing filled my ears. Behind me, I could hear the creature giving chase. It crashed through the undergrowth with terrifying speed, its growls growing louder with each passing second. The sound spurred me to run faster than I ever thought possible. "Help!" I screamed, though I knew it was futile. There was no one out here to hear me, no one to come to my rescue. I was alone with this nightmare. I dodged around trees and leaped over fallen logs, my feet barely seeming to touch the ground. But no matter how fast I ran, the sounds of pursuit grew ever closer. Suddenly I felt it, a blast of hot, fetid breath on the back of my neck. The creature was right behind me, so close I could almost feel its jaws snapping at my heels. No, I gasped, pushing myself even harder. My lungs burned and my muscles screamed in protest, but terror gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. I put on a burst of speed, ducking and weaving through the trees in a desperate attempt to throw off my pursuer. For a moment I thought I might have gained some ground. The sounds behind me seemed to fade slightly. Hope surged through me, giving me a second wind. But then my foot caught on something, a root or a rock, I couldn't tell. The world spun as I lost my balance, tumbling forward. To my horror, I realized I was falling down a steep embankment I hadn't even seen in my blind panic. I rolled uncontrollably, unable to stop my descent. Rocks and branches battered my body as I fell. Pain exploded through me with each impact, but I couldn't even cry out. All the air had been driven from my lungs. After what felt like an eternity, I finally came to a stop at the bottom of the slope. I lay there, dazed and gasping, trying desperately to draw breath back into my battered body. As I struggled to regain my senses, I became aware of a sound from above. Heavy breathing and the crunch of leaves under massive paws. My heart, already racing, seemed to skip several beats as I realized the truth. The beast was at the top of the embankment, prowling back and forth as it looked down at me. I lay as still as possible, hardly daring to breathe. My body screamed with pain from the fall, but I pushed it aside, focusing all my attention on the creature above me. "Please," I whispered, though I knew it was pointless. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't going to be swayed by pleas for mercy. I could hear it moving, its claws scraping against rock as it seemed to search for a way down the steep slope. Each sound sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Slowly, carefully, I tried to move. My body protested, but nothing seemed to be broken. If I could just get to my feet, maybe I could find somewhere to hide. But as I shifted, a small cascade of pebbles clattered down the embankment. The noise, though slight, was enough. The creature's growl intensified, and I heard it start to make its way down the slope. Panic gave me strength. Ignoring the pain, I scrambled to my feet and looked around wildly for any escape route. The embankment had deposited me in a small ravine. To my left and right, the walls rose steeply, offering no easy way out. Ahead, the ravine continued, twisting out of sight. I had no choice. As I heard the creature's approach growing closer, I took off down the ravine. My legs felt like jelly, and every step sent shockwaves of pain through my battered body, but I pushed on. Come on, I urged myself, my voice a ragged whisper. The sound of pursuit filled the ravine, echoing off the rocky walls. It was impossible to tell how close the creature was, but I knew I couldn't stop. To stop was to die. As I ran, my mind raced almost as fast as my feet. What was this thing? How could something like this exist? And why, of all the people in these woods, had it fixated on me? I had no answers, only the primal drive to survive. So I ran, pushing my body to its limits and beyond. The ravine twisted and turned, and I followed it blindly, praying it would lead to salvation. But with each step, each labored breath, a terrible certainty grew in my mind. I couldn't keep this up forever. Sooner or later, my strength would give out, and when it did, the beast would be waiting. As I rounded another bend in the ravine, I saw something that made my heart leap. A narrow crevice in the rock wall, barely visible unless you were looking right at it. It was my only chance. With the last of my strength, I lunged for the opening, squeezing my body into the tight space. Sharp edges of rock scraped against me, but I pushed deeper, desperate to get as far in as possible. Just as I wedged myself into the crevice, I heard the creature round the bend. Its growls echoed in the confined space, and I could hear its claws scrabbling at the rock as it tried to reach me. I pressed myself as far back as I could, my chest heaving as I struggled to catch my breath. The monster's hot, rancid breath washed over me as it snapped and snarled at the entrance to my hiding place. Time seemed to lose all meaning as I huddled there, trapped between unyielding stone and certain death. My body trembled with exhaustion and fear, and I knew that if the creature found a way to reach me, I had nothing left to fight with. But slowly, agonizingly, the sounds of the beast's attempts to reach me began to fade. Its growls grew more frustrated, then distant. Finally, after what felt like hours, silence fell. I remained frozen in place, afraid to move, afraid to even breathe too loudly. Was it truly gone, or was this just another trick? How long would I have to wait before I could be sure? As I sat there, my mind spinning with questions and fear, one thought rose above all others. This nightmare was far from over, and if I wanted to survive, I would have to find a way out of these woods before night fell again. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, praying I had enough signal to call for help. But as the screen lit up, revealing no bars and a critically low battery, I realized with sinking dread that I was truly on my own. My body ached as I dragged myself out of the crevice, every muscle screaming in protest. The forest had fallen eerily silent, but I knew better than to trust that silence. Somewhere out there, that thing was waiting. As I stumbled through the ravine, my eyes darted frantically, searching for any sign of movement. That's when I saw it, a small opening in the rock face, barely visible behind a tangle of vines. A cave. Without hesitation, I scrambled towards it. The entrance was tight, forcing me to squeeze through on my belly. Sharp edges of rock scraped against my skin, but I hardly noticed. All that mattered was getting inside, finding safety. The cave opened up slightly once I was past the entrance. It was pitch black inside, the darkness so complete it felt like a physical presence. I huddled against the damp stone wall, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. "Please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who or what I was pleading with. "Please don't let it find me." Time lost all meaning in that dark, cramped space. Minutes bled into hours as I sat motionless, straining my ears for any sound of approach. Every so often I'd hear something, a rustle of leaves, a snapping twig, and my heart would race, certain that the beast had found me. But each time, the sound would fade, leaving me alone with my terror and the oppressive darkness. As I sat there, my mind kept replaying the events that had led me to this point. The massive paw prints around my camp, the mangled deer carcass, those gleaming yellow eyes. It all seemed like a nightmare, but the pain in my battered body was all too real. This can't be happening, I muttered to myself, my voice barely audible. Things like this don't exist. They can't. But denials couldn't change what I'd seen, what I'd experienced. Whatever that creature was, it defied everything I thought I knew about the natural world. Hours crawled by. My legs had long since gone numb from sitting in the same position, and thirst clawed at my throat. But I didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. For all I knew, the beast was right outside, waiting for me to reveal myself. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the quality of the darkness began to change. A faint grayness seeped into the cave, growing steadily brighter. Dawn was breaking. Hope surged through me. I'd made it through the night. Surely the creature would retreat with the coming of day. Still, I waited, counting my heartbeats as the light grew stronger. Only when I could clearly see the outline of the cave entrance did I finally allow myself to move. Every joint popped as I uncurled from my huddled position. I crawled to the entrance, my movements slow and cautious. The drive back to my apartment in the outskirts of Albany was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and every shadow on the road made me flinch. As I finally pulled into my driveway, the familiar sight of my small two-story house brought little comfort. I practically ran from the car to the front door, fumbling with my keys. Once inside, I slammed the door shut and engaged every lock. My breathing came in ragged gasps as I moved through the house, securing each window and drawing the curtains tight. "You're safe now," I muttered to myself, though the words rang hollow. "It can't get you here." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The creature I'd encountered in the Adirondacks wasn't bound by the rules of nature or reason. Who was to say it couldn't follow me here? I stood in the middle of my living room, my eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. The house felt alien, no longer the safe haven it had once been. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. A car backfired in the distance, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Get a grip, Mike," I scolded myself, but it was useless. The fear had sunk its claws too deep. Unable to relax, I decided to distract myself with research. I booted up my laptop, my fingers flying over the keys as I searched for any information on large predators in the Adirondacks. Hours passed as I pored over wildlife reports, eyewitness accounts, and local legends. But nothing I found came close to describing the monster I'd encountered. Bears, wolves, even the occasional mountain lion sighting. None of them matched the size, speed, or sheer otherworldliness of the creature that had hunted me. As night fell, my paranoia intensified. I found myself checking and rechecking the locks, peering out through gaps in the curtains at the darkening street. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise a potential threat. My phone buzzed, making me start. It was a text from my best friend, Sarah. "Hey, haven't heard from you since you got back. Everything okay?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How could I possibly explain what had happened? She'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. After a long moment, I typed out a reply. "Yeah, just tired. Camping was intense. Talk later." I hit send, then immediately felt guilty for the brush-off. But what else could I say? Over the next few days, my behavior grew increasingly erratic. I called in sick to work, unable to face the outside world. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by long nights of vigilance, jumping at every sound. My friends and family started to notice. Sarah stopped by unannounced on the third day, concern etched on her face when I finally answered the door. "Jesus, Mike, you look like hell," she said, taking in my disheveled appearance and the dark circles under my eyes. "Thanks," I replied dryly, reluctantly stepping aside to let her in. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the state of my living room. Maps of the Adirondacks covered every surface, along with printouts of wildlife reports and blurry photos of supposed cryptids. "What's all this?" she asked, picking up a sketch I'd made of the creature. "Mike, what happened out there?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. How could I possibly explain? I saw something in the woods, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something that shouldn't exist. Sarah's brow furrowed with worry. What do you mean? Like a bear? I laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. I wish it had been a bear. This was something else, something monstrous. I could see the doubt in her eyes, mixed with growing concern. Mike, maybe you should talk to someone. A professional, I mean. This doesn't seem healthy. You think I'm crazy? I said flatly. Sarah sighed, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched away instinctively. I think you're sleep-deprived and clearly traumatized by something, she said gently. Whatever you saw or thought you saw. I know what I saw, I snapped, immediately regretting my outburst as Sarah took a step back. I'm sorry, I can't explain it. But it was real, Sarah. It was real, and it's still out there. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. I could see Sarah struggling to find the right words, torn between her concern for me and her disbelief in my story. Finally, she spoke. Okay, let's say for a moment that what you saw was real. You're safe now, right? You're home, miles away from those woods. Maybe it's time to try and move on. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe that I was safe, that it was all over. But deep down, I knew better. Yeah, maybe you're right, I lied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. I'll try to get some sleep, okay? Sarah didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. Promise me you'll call if you need anything. Anytime, day or night. I promise, I said, already knowing I wouldn't. How could I drag her into this nightmare? After Sarah left, the house felt even emptier, the shadows deeper. I paced restlessly, checking and rechecking the locks, peering out windows at the quiet suburban street. As night fell once again, I found myself in the backyard, staring out at the tree line that bordered my property. The woods here were nothing like the vast wilderness of the Adirondacks, just a small patch of forest between housing developments. But as I stood there, the darkness seemed to deepen, to breathe with malevolent life. And then I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold and my heart nearly stop in my chest. A howl, distant but unmistakable. The same bone-chilling cry I'd heard in the mountains, but impossibly, unthinkably close. No, I whispered, stumbling backward towards the house. No. It can't be. But there was no mistaking that sound. Somehow, against all logic and reason, the creature had followed me. It was here in my quiet suburban neighborhood, closer to civilization than I ever thought possible. As I retreated into the house, slamming and locking the door behind me, one thought echoed through my mind. Nowhere was safe. The hunt wasn't over, it had only just begun. The frantic barking jolted me from a fitful sleep. My neighbor's German shepherd, usually so quiet, was going absolutely berserk. I sat up in bed, heart pounding as I glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. No, I muttered, throwing off the covers and stumbling to the window. Just as I reached the curtains, the barking cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. With trembling hands, I parted the curtains just enough to peer out into the night. At first, I saw nothing but the empty street, bathed in the sickly orange glow of streetlights. Then movement caught my eye. A massive shape emerged from between two houses across the way. My breath caught in my throat as I took in its impossible size, easily as large as a bear but with the unmistakable shape of a wolf. It moved with an unnatural grace, loping down the center of the street as if it owned the night. As it passed under a streetlight, I caught a glimpse of matted fur and muscles rippling beneath its shaggy coat. There was no doubt in my mind, this was the creature from the Adirondacks. Somehow, impossibly, it had followed me home. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with numb fingers. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's calm voice felt surreal in contrast to the terror gripping me. There's a A wolf, I stammered. Or something like it. It's huge. Way too big to be normal. It's on Maple Street, heading east. There was a pause on the other end. When the operator spoke again, her voice had a note of skepticism. Sir, are you sure about what you're seeing? We don't typically have wolves in this area. I know what I saw, I snapped, my fear turning to frustration. It just killed my neighbor's dog. Please, you have to send someone. All right, sir. We'll send a patrol car to check it out. Can I get your name and address? I gave her the information, but I could tell from her tone that she didn't believe me. As I hung up, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. They thought I was crazy or playing a prank. They wouldn't take this seriously. Fine, I muttered, grabbing my jacket and shoes. If they won't believe me, I'll get proof. I snatched up my digital camera, an old model but with a good zoom lens. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As I headed for the door, a small voice in the back of my mind screamed that this was insane, that I should stay inside where it was safe. But I pushed it aside. I had to do this. I had to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The night air was cool on my face as I stepped outside. The street was eerily quiet, with no sign of the creature. But in the distance, I could hear the faint sound of sirens. The police were coming, but I knew they'd be too late. I set off in the direction I'd seen the beast heading, my camera clutched tightly in my hands. Every shadow made me jump. Every rustle of leaves sent my heart racing. But I pressed on, driven by a desperate need to validate my own sanity. As I turned onto a side street, I caught a glimpse of movement at the far end. Something large disappeared into an alley between two buildings. Without thinking, I broke into a run, determined not to lose the trail. The alley was dark, lit only by a single flickering light above a back door. Dumpsters and scattered trash created a maze of shadows. I moved forward slowly, my breath coming in short gasps. This is crazy, I whispered to myself. What am I doing? But it was too late to turn back now. I raised my camera, ready to capture any movement. And then I saw it. At the far end of the alley, half hidden in shadow, stood the creature. It was even larger up close, its shoulders easily reaching my chest. But it was the eyes that held me transfixed, glowing yellow orbs that radiated an unnatural intelligence. For a moment, neither of us moved. I stood frozen, my finger hovering over the camera's shutter button. The beast regarded me with an almost curious tilt of its massive head. Then, with a low growl that I felt more than heard, it took a step forward. The spell broke. I raised the camera and snapped a rapid series of photos, the flash illuminating the alley in stark bursts of light. The creature snarled, momentarily blinded, and I seized my chance. I turned and ran, my feet pounding on the pavement as I sprinted back towards the street. Behind me, I could hear the monster recovering, its claws scraping on concrete as it gave chase. "Help!" I screamed as I burst out of the alley. "Somebody help me!" But the street was deserted. No police, no curious neighbors awakened by the commotion. Just me and the beast. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my lungs burning as I gasped for air. I could hear it behind me, gaining ground with every stride. Its hot breath seemed to tickle the back of my neck, spurring me to push even harder. Just as I thought my legs would give out, I saw headlights approaching. A police cruiser rounded the corner, its spotlight sweeping the street. "Here!" I yelled, waving my arms frantically. "Over here!" The car screeched to a halt and two officers jumped out, hands on their weapons. "Get down!" one of them shouted, and I dove to the ground without hesitation. I expected to hear gunshots, shouts, something. But as I lay there on the cold pavement, all I heard was confused muttering from the officers. "Sir?" One of them approached cautiously. "Are you all right? What's going on?" I rolled over, looking back the way I'd come. The street was empty. No sign of the massive beast that had been mere feet from tearing me apart. It was right there, I stammered, struggling to my feet. The wolf, the monster, it was chasing me. The officers exchanged a look I knew all too well, the look of people who thought they were dealing with a madman. "Sir, we're going to need you to calm down," the first officer said, his hand still resting on his holstered weapon. "There's no wolf here, no monster, just you, running down the middle of the street at 3:30 in the morning." "But I have proof." I held up my camera triumphantly. "I took pictures. It's all here." As I fumbled with the camera's display, my heart sank. The screen was cracked, likely damaged in my headlong flight. No matter how many buttons I pressed, it remained stubbornly dark. "No," I whispered, the weight of despair settling over me. "No, this can't be happening." "Why don't you come with us, sir?" the second officer said, gently but firmly taking my arm. "We'll get this all sorted out down at the station." As they led me to the cruiser, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Somewhere in the shadows, I was certain the creature was watching, laughing in its own monstrous way at my predicament. The hunt wasn't over. It had only changed venues. And now, with no one believing me and no evidence to support my story, I was more alone than ever. The empty streets echoed with the sound of my pounding footsteps and ragged breathing. But it was the other sound that chilled me to my core. The rhythmic scraping of claws on pavement, growing closer with each passing second. I didn't dare look back. I knew what was chasing me, and I knew that to hesitate, even for a moment, meant certain death. So I ran, my legs burning with exertion, my lungs screaming for air. "Help!" I shouted, my voice hoarse and desperate. "Somebody, please!" But the streets remained deserted. No lights flickered on in the surrounding houses. No curious faces peered out of windows. It was as if the entire world had abandoned me to this nightmare. The creature's hot breath seemed to tickle the back of my neck, spurring me to push even harder. I rounded a corner, nearly losing my footing on the slick pavement, and found myself facing a construction site. Without a second thought, I vaulted over the chain-link fence, ignoring the no trespassing sign. Behind me, I heard the fence rattle and groan as the beast crashed through it like it was made of paper. The construction site was a maze of half-finished structures, scaffolding, and heavy equipment. I weaved through the obstacles, hoping to slow my pursuer, but the sound of destruction behind me told me it was tearing through everything in its path. I ducked behind a cement mixer, trying to catch my breath. For a moment, the only sound was my own thundering heartbeat. Then I heard it. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Where are you?" I whispered, my eyes darting frantically from shadow to shadow. As if in answer, a howl erupted, so loud and primal it shook me to my very core. The sound bounced off the surrounding buildings, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. But one thing was clear. The beast was close, and it was angry. I broke cover, sprinting toward the nearest unfinished building. It was little more than a skeletal framework of steel and concrete, but it offered the one thing I desperately needed: height. As I reached the structure, I grabbed onto the nearest scaffolding and began to climb. My arms trembled with fatigue, and more than once I nearly lost my grip on the slippery metal. But fear drove me upward, always upward. Another howl split the night, closer this time. I risked a glance down and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was at the base of the building, its massive form clearly visible in the dim light. As I watched, it began to climb, using its powerful claws to scale the structure with terrifying ease. No, no, I muttered, redoubling my efforts. I reached the top floor, or what would eventually be the top floor, and pulled myself onto the bare concrete. The wind whipped around me, cold and biting at this height. I stumbled to the edge, looking for any possible escape route. My heart sank as I realized the truth of my situation. There was nowhere left to go. The neighboring buildings were too far to jump to, and the drop to the street below was easily fatal. I was trapped. The sound of claws on concrete told me the beast had reached my level. I turned slowly, my back pressed against the low wall that marked the edge of the roof. There it stood, blocking my only exit. In the pale moonlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. It was even more terrifying than I remembered. Easily 8 feet tall on its hind legs, with muscles rippling beneath its matted fur. But it was the eyes that held me transfixed, glowing yellow orbs that radiated malevolence and hunger. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear and exhaustion. The creature's only response was a low growl as it took a step forward. I pressed myself harder against the wall, feeling small pieces of concrete crumble away beneath my fingers. Time seemed to slow as the beast tensed, preparing to lunge. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me. If this was how it ended, at least I would face it head-on. But just as the creature was about to spring, a new sound cut through the night. The wail of police sirens, growing closer by the second. The beast's head snapped towards the sound, its ears flattening against its skull. For a heartbeat, it seemed torn between its prey, me, and the threat of discovery. Then, with a final bone-chilling howl, it turned and bounded back the way it had come. I watched in disbelief as it leaped from the building, landing with impossible grace on a lower level before disappearing into the shadows of the construction site. I sank to my knees, my legs no longer able to support me. The adrenaline that had kept me going began to ebb, leaving me shaking and nauseous. "Up here," I tried to shout, but it came out as little more than a hoarse whisper. "I'm up here." Minutes passed before I heard voices calling out, flashlight beams sweeping the area. It took everything I had left to stand and wave my arms, finally attracting their attention. As the police and paramedics made their way up to me, I tried to organize my thoughts. How could I explain what had happened? Who would believe me? "Sir?" A young officer approached cautiously. "Are you all right? What are you doing up here?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The truth sounded insane even in my own head. Instead, I gestured weakly at my torn clothes and the scratches on my arms. I was attacked, I managed. Something chased me up here. The officer's expression shifted from concern to skepticism. "Something? Can you be more specific?" I hesitated, weighing my options. If I told the truth, they'd think I was crazy. But if I lied, what if the creature came back? What if someone else became its prey? "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I said finally. "But it's still out there. It's dangerous. You have to find it before it hurts someone else." The officer exchanged a look with his partner that I knew all too well, the look of people dealing with someone they thought was unhinged. "Why don't you come with us, sir?" he said gently. "We'll get you checked out, and you can tell us everything that happened." As they led me towards the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Somewhere in the shadows below, I was certain the creature was watching, biding its time. The hunt wasn't over. It had only been interrupted. I stood on the edge of the roof, my back pressed against the low concrete wall, heart pounding in my chest. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere to hide. The creature that had haunted my nightmares since that fateful night in the Adirondacks was here, real and terrifying beyond imagination. It stalked towards me with predatory grace, its massive form silhouetted against the night sky. Each step was deliberate, calculated. Yellow eyes, glowing with an otherworldly intelligence, were fixed on me. Saliva dripped from its gaping maw, filled with teeth that could easily tear me apart. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. "Don't come any closer." The beast's only response was a low, rumbling growl that I felt in my bones. It was clear that words meant nothing to this monster. It wanted only one thing: to finish the hunt it had started in the forest. Panic overtook me as I realized the futility of my situation. In desperation, I looked around for anything I could use to defend myself. The roof was littered with construction debris, pieces of wood, metal pipes, and chunks of concrete. Without thinking, I grabbed the nearest object, a length of rebar, and hurled it at the creature with all my might. The metal rod struck the beast's shoulder, eliciting a snarl of pain and rage. But instead of driving it back, my attack only seemed to enrage it further. Its muscles bunched, preparing to spring. "Oh, God," I whispered, realizing my mistake too late. The creature lunged forward with incredible speed. I tried to dodge, but in the confined space of the rooftop, there was little room to maneuver. I felt a searing pain across my left arm as its claws raked through my jacket and into my flesh. I cried out in agony, stumbling backwards. Warm blood trickled down my arm, and the coppery scent seemed to drive the beast into a frenzy. It circled me, its massive form blocking any chance of escape. "Help!" I screamed, though I knew it was useless. Who could possibly help me against this nightmare? I continued to retreat, throwing whatever debris I could grab at the monster. A piece of wood bounced harmlessly off its thick hide. A chunk of concrete drew another growl, but did little to slow its advance. My heel hit the edge of the roof and I teetered precariously. Below me was nothing but a long drop to the unforgiving pavement. Behind me, certain death approached on 4 legs. The creature tensed, preparing for another attack. I braced myself, knowing that this time I wouldn't be able to dodge. Just as the beast was about to pounce, a brilliant light suddenly flooded the rooftop. The unexpected illumination startled both of us. I threw up my uninjured arm to shield my eyes, momentarily blinded. A deafening whir of helicopter blades cut through the night air. "This is the police," a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Remain where you are." I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the sudden brightness. The creature let out a howl of frustration and confusion. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. The beast's head swiveled between me and the helicopter, its ears flattened against its skull. It was clearly agitated by the noise and the light, unsure of this new threat. "Here," I shouted, waving my good arm at the helicopter. "I'm here. Help me." The creature snarled one last time, then turned and bounded towards the far edge of the roof. I watched in disbelief as it leaped, sailing through the air to land on a neighboring building before disappearing into the shadows. As quickly as it had begun, the confrontation was over. I sank to my knees, the adrenaline draining from my system, leaving me shaky and nauseous. The pain in my arm, dulled during the fight, now returned with a vengeance. The helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight sweeping the area. On the street below, I could hear sirens approaching. Help was coming, but I knew it was too late. The creature was gone, leaving me once again with an unbelievable story and no proof. As I waited for the police and paramedics to reach me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The beast had been thwarted twice now, but its determination was clear. It wouldn't stop until it finished what it had started in the Adirondacks. I looked down at my bloody arm, the deep gashes a testament to the reality of what I'd faced. Maybe now, with actual physical evidence, someone would believe me. Maybe now I could convince them of the danger that stalked our city. But as I heard the pounding of feet on the stairs and the shouts of approaching officers, doubt crept in. Would they believe my story of a monstrous wolf creature? Or would they find some way to rationalize my injuries, to dismiss my account as the ramblings of a madman? One thing was certain, I couldn't face this alone anymore. As the first police officer burst onto the roof, gun drawn and flashlight sweeping the area, I made a decision. I would tell them everything, consequences be damned. Because if I didn't, if I couldn't convince them of the truth, then no one was safe. The beast was still out there, waiting, hunting. And I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that it would be back. The blinding spotlight from the helicopter still burned in my retinas as I watched the beast retreat. Its massive form melted into the shadows of the building, disappearing as if it had never existed. But the searing pain in my arm and the lingering scent of wet fur and primal rage told me otherwise. I couldn't stay here. The creature might be gone for now, but I knew better than to think it had given up. This was just a temporary reprieve. With trembling legs, I pushed myself to my feet. The stairwell entrance gaped before me like the maw of some concrete beast. It was dark, confined, the perfect hunting ground for a predator. But it was also my only way down. "Come on," I muttered to myself, stumbling towards the door. "Move." I took the stairs 2 at a time, my footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the building sounded like approaching claws. My breath came in ragged gasps, panic threatening to overwhelm me. "Please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was praying to. "Please let me make it." I lost count of how many flights I descended. My legs burned, and my injured arm throbbed with each jarring step. But I didn't dare slow down. In my mind's eye, I could see the creature right behind me, yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness, saliva dripping from its jaws as it closed in for the kill. Finally, mercifully, I reached the ground floor. I burst through the exit door, the cool night air hitting me like a physical force. For a moment, I stood there, gulping in great lungfuls of air, my eyes darting around wildly. "Freeze, police!" The shout made me jump. Suddenly, I was surrounded by a ring of officers, their weapons drawn and flashlights trained on me. The helicopter spotlight found me again, bathing the scene in harsh white light. "Hands where we can see them," one officer barked. I raised my hands slowly, wincing as the movement sent fresh pain shooting through my injured arm. "Please," I gasped. "You have to listen to me. There's a creature." "Sir, you're trespassing on a construction site," the officer cut me off, "and we've had reports of someone causing a disturbance. I'm going to need you to calm down and explain what you're doing here." I looked from face to face, seeing nothing but stern professionalism and growing impatience. How could I make them understand? "You don't understand." I tried again. "There's a monster out here. It attacked me in the woods, and now it's followed me here. It's huge like a wolf but bigger, and it's intelligent. It's hunting me." My words tumbled out in a frantic rush. Even to my own ears, I sounded unhinged. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of skepticism and concern. "Sir, are you under the influence of any substances?" one of them asked. "What?" "No, I'm telling you the truth." I held out my injured arm. "Look." It clawed me. "This thing is real, and it's dangerous. You have to believe me." A younger officer stepped forward, his flashlight illuminating the gashes on my arm. "He is injured," he reported. "Could be from the construction site. We should get him checked out." "I didn't do this to myself," I insisted. "It was the creature. It's still out there. We're all in danger as long as it's—" A howl split the night, so loud and close it made several of the officers jump. It was a sound of primal rage and frustration. The beast had found its quarry surrounded and out of reach. "What the hell was that?" one of the officers exclaimed. "That's it," I shouted. "That's the creature. You have to go after it before it hurts someone else." The senior officer barked out orders. "Johnson, Taylor, check it out. The rest of you, secure the perimeter." Two officers jogged off in the direction of the howl, while the others spread out, their flashlights probing the darkness. I stood there, heart pounding, as we waited for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the radio crackled to life. "All clear here, sir. No sign of any animal, let alone a monster wolf." The senior officer turned back to me, his expression hard. "All right, sir, I think you've got some explaining to do. We're going to need you to come down to the station." "But—" I started to protest, then stopped. What was the point? They hadn't believed me before, and they certainly wouldn't now. I sagged in defeat, the adrenaline leaving my system and taking the last of my strength with it. As they led me to a waiting patrol car, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Somewhere in the darkness, I knew the creature was watching, waiting for its next opportunity. The car door slammed shut, and as we pulled away from the construction site, I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision. A large shadow detached itself from the side of a building, loping off into the night. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the cool glass of the window. The beast was still out there, and no one believed me. I was alone in this nightmare, with no idea how to stop what was coming. As the city lights blurred past, one thought echoed through my mind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The creature had my scent now, and it wouldn't stop until it finished what it had started in those dark Adirondack woods. The hunt would continue, and next time, there might be no escape. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed incessantly, their harsh glare only intensifying my pounding headache. I'd been here for hours repeating my story to increasingly skeptical officers. The adrenaline had long since worn off, leaving me exhausted and aching. "Mr. Thompson," the detective said, closing his notepad with a sigh, "I think we're done here." I leaned forward, hope flaring briefly. "You believe me?" He shook his head, his expression a mix of pity and exasperation. "What I believe is that you've had a rough night. We found no evidence of any large predator at the construction site. No tracks, no fur, nothing. But my arm," I started, gesturing to the bandages covering the claw marks, "could easily have been caused by debris or a fall." He cut me off. "Look, we've run a tox screen. When it comes back clean, you'll be free to go. I strongly suggest you see a doctor, and maybe consider talking to someone about what you've been through." The implication was clear. They thought I was crazy, or on drugs, or both. I slumped back in my chair, defeat washing over me. "Can I at least call someone?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The detective nodded, sliding a phone across the desk. "Make it quick." I dialed Sarah's number, praying she'd answer despite the early hour. On the third ring, her groggy voice came through. "Hello? Sarah, it's me. I need your help." There was a pause, then, "Mike? What's going on? Where are you?" I glanced at the detective, who was pretending not to listen. "I'm at the police station. It's a long story. Can you come get me?" Another pause. "Are you okay? Are you in trouble?" "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "Please, Sarah. I don't know who else to call." I could practically hear her internal debate. Finally, she sighed. "Okay. I'll be there soon. Just hang tight, all right?" "Thank you," I breathed, relief flooding through me. As I hung up, the detective raised an eyebrow. "Girlfriend?" I shook my head. "Just a friend, the only one who might still believe me." He didn't respond, just led me back to the holding cell to wait. An hour later, I was released into Sarah's custody. She stood in the lobby, her face a mask of concern and confusion. "Mike, what happened?" she asked as soon as we were outside. "You look terrible." I ran a hand through my disheveled hair, wincing as the movement pulled at my injured arm. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." She frowned, leading me to her car. "Try me." So I did. As we drove through the early morning streets, I told her everything. The creature in the woods, its impossible appearance in the city, the chase, the confrontation on the rooftop. Sarah listened in silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mike," she said finally, her voice gentle. "You know how this sounds, right?" I slumped in my seat. "Like I'm completely insane. I know. Have you considered that maybe it wasn't real? That your mind might be playing tricks on you after what happened in the woods?" "It was real, Sarah," I insisted. "I know what I saw, what I felt." I held up my bandaged arm. "These wounds are real." She glanced at my arm, her brow furrowed. "I believe that you believe it. But Mike, giant wolf monsters don't exist. There has to be another explanation." I turned to look out the window, watching the city wake up around us. People going about their normal lives, oblivious to the nightmare that stalked the shadows. "Can you drop me off at my place?" I asked, suddenly feeling very tired. "I need to shower and change." Sarah nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. At home, I turned on the TV as I cleaned up, more out of habit than interest. A news report caught my attention. "Series of animal attacks has local authorities baffled," the anchor was saying. "Officials believe a rogue bear may be responsible for the incidents which have left several pets dead and one person injured." I froze, water dripping from my hair. They were explaining it away, rationalizing the unexplainable. But I knew the truth. After showering and changing, I made a decision. I had to go back, to find some proof that what I'd experienced was real. The construction site was quiet when I arrived, the workers not yet on site. Yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze, but it was easy enough to slip past. I made my way to the roof, my heart pounding with each step. The morning sun illuminated the space where just hours ago I'd faced my nightmare, but there was nothing. No claw marks, no fur, no sign of the titanic struggle that had taken place. Just my own footprints in the dust. I sank to my knees, despair washing over me. How could I prove what had happened when there was no evidence? My next stop was the hospital. The doctor who examined my arm frowned at the wounds. "These are deep," he muttered, "but consistent with lacerations from sharp debris. You're lucky you didn't do more damage in your fall." "It wasn't a fall," I insisted. "It was—" He held up a hand, cutting me off. "Mr. Thompson, the police report says you were found trespassing at a construction site. These injuries are exactly what we'd expect from an accident in that environment." I gave up trying to explain. What was the point? That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to move. Sleep was impossible. The truth weighed heavily on me. The beast was still out there. It had followed me from the wilderness to the heart of the city. It had my scent, and I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that it wouldn't stop until it finished what it had started. And no one believed me. I was alone in this nightmare, with no idea how to stop what was coming. As the first light of dawn crept through my window, I made a decision. If no one would believe me, if no one would help me, then I'd have to face this on my own. The crunch of fallen leaves beneath my boots echoes through the crisp autumn air as I push deeper into the Adirondack wilderness. I've been hiking for hours, relishing the solitude and the vibrant colors of the changing foliage. The trail winds its way through ancient maples and towering pines, their branches reaching skyward like gnarled fingers. I pause to catch my breath, taking a swig from my water bottle and wiping the sweat from my brow. The late afternoon sun filters through the canopy, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. I check my watch, 5:30 p.m. I should probably start heading back soon if I want to make it to my car before dark. Just as I'm about to turn around, something catches my eye. Off to the side of the trail, partially hidden by a fallen log, lies a backpack. It's weathered and torn, as if it's been out here for weeks. Curiosity gets the better of me, and I approach to investigate. "Hello?" I call out, scanning the surrounding area. "Is anyone there?" No response, just the whisper of wind through the trees and the occasional chirp of a distant bird. I crouch down to examine the backpack more closely. It's caked with mud and looks like it's been ravaged by animals. A chill runs down my spine as I notice what appear to be claw marks raking across the fabric. Snap. I whirl around, heart pounding. A twig has broken somewhere behind me. "Who's there?" I demand, my voice wavering slightly. Only shadows dance between the trees, shifting and swaying in the breeze. I strain my ears, listening for any sign of movement, but hear nothing beyond the usual forest ambiance. "Get a grip," I mutter to myself, shaking my head. It's probably just a deer or something. Still, an uneasy feeling settles in the pit of my stomach. I decide it's time to head back. As I start retracing my steps along the trail, I can't shake the sensation of being watched. The forest that had seemed so welcoming just moments ago now feels oppressive, almost menacing. The sun dips lower on the horizon, painting the sky in vivid streaks of orange and crimson. Under different circumstances, I might have paused to admire the breathtaking sunset. But now that blood-red glow casts an eerie pallor over the landscape, transforming familiar shapes into grotesque silhouettes. I quicken my pace, eager to put as much distance between myself and that abandoned backpack as possible. The temperature drops noticeably as twilight descends, and I zip up my jacket against the chill. Shadows lengthen, stretching across the path like grasping fingers. A twig snaps again, closer this time. I spin around, heart hammering against my ribs. Is someone following me? I call out, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. Silence. I turn back to the trail, walking faster now. My breath comes in short, sharp bursts, visible in the cooling air. Every rustle of leaves, every creaking branch sets my nerves on edge. I'm no stranger to these woods, but something feels different tonight. Wrong. The trail curves sharply to the right, and as I round the bend, I freeze in my tracks. There, not 20 yards ahead, stands a massive figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. For a moment, my brain refuses to process what I'm seeing. It looks like, but it can't be, a wolf, but impossibly large, easily the size of a bear. It's hunched over something on the ground. I realize with horror that it's the carcass of a deer. The creature's muzzle is buried in the deer's torn abdomen, and I can hear the wet, sickening sounds of flesh being rended from bone. I take an involuntary step backward, and a twig snaps beneath my foot. The beast's head snaps up, and my breath catches in my throat as I spot a pair of glowing eyes fixed directly on me. They shine with an unnatural, almost phosphorescent light in the gathering gloom. For an eternal moment we stare at each other, frozen in a tableau of predator and prey. Then slowly, deliberately, the creature rises to its full height. It towers over me, muscles rippling beneath matted fur. This is no ordinary wolf. Its proportions are all wrong, the torso too long, the limbs too articulated. As it steps into a shaft of fading sunlight, I catch a glimpse of wickedly curved claws extending from massive paws. A low, guttural growl rumbles from deep within the beast's chest. The sound vibrates through the air, sending shivers down my spine. Every instinct screams at me to run, but I remain rooted to the spot, paralyzed by terror. The creature takes a step forward, then another. Its lips curl back, revealing rows of yellowed fangs, each as long as my finger. Strings of saliva and gore dangle from its jaws. "This isn't real," I whisper, my voice barely audible. "This can't be happening." But as the monster's growl builds to a snarl, reality comes crashing down around me. This is no nightmare I can wake up from. This is happening here and now, and if I don't move, I'm going to die. Adrenaline surges through my system, breaking the spell of fear that held me immobile. I turn and run, crashing through the underbrush without regard for the trail. Branches whip at my face, thorns tear at my clothes, but I barely notice. All that matters is putting distance between myself and that thing. Behind me, I hear the thunderous impact of heavy paws hitting the earth. The creature is giving chase. Panic lends wings to my feet as I sprint headlong through the forest, heedless of direction or destination. My lungs burn, my legs scream in protest, but I don't dare slow down. As I vault over a fallen log, my foot catches on a root and I stumble. For one heart-stopping moment, I think I'm going to fall, but I manage to regain my balance and keep running. The sound of pursuit grows closer with each passing second. Darkness has fallen in earnest now, and I can barely see where I'm going. Moonlight filters weakly through the canopy, casting everything in shades of gray. I duck under low-hanging branches, leap over obstacles I can barely make out. The growls behind me grow louder, more frenzied. I risk a glance over my shoulder and immediately wish I hadn't. The creature is gaining on me, its eyes blazing with hunger and malice. In that moment, I know with absolute certainty that I'm no longer at the top of the food chain. I'm prey, being run to ground by a predator far beyond my comprehension. As I turn back to face forward, a new sound reaches my ears, the rush of running water. A river. If I can just reach it, maybe I can lose the monster, find some way to escape. With renewed determination, I push myself harder, ignoring the burning in my muscles and the ragged gasps tearing from my throat. The sound of water grows louder, and through the trees ahead, I catch glimpses of moonlight reflecting off a fast-moving current. Just a little further, just a few more steps. I can make it. I have to make it. The beast's hot breath washes over the back of my neck, and I know I'm out of time. With one final, desperate lunge, I burst through the tree line and find myself on the edge of a steep embankment. Below, the river churns and froths, swollen with recent rains. There's no time to second guess, no time to look for alternatives. I leap, plunging into the icy waters below. The last thing I hear before I'm submerged is a bone-chilling howl of frustration echoing through the night. As the current sweeps me away, one thought burns in my mind. I'm alive for now, but something tells me this is far from over. The icy river water shocks my system as I'm swept downstream, gasping and sputtering. For a moment, the cold numbs my terror, replacing it with the more immediate fear of drowning. I flail wildly, managing to keep my head above water as I'm carried along by the swift current. Suddenly, a bone-chilling howl pierces the night air, rising above the rush of the river. It's close. Too close. My heart leaps into my throat as I realize the creature hasn't given up the chase. I can't stay in the water. I'll freeze or drown long before I reach safety. With desperate strokes, I fight my way toward the riverbank. The current works against me, threatening to pull me under with each passing second. My sodden clothes weigh me down and my muscles scream in protest. But the memory of those glowing eyes and razor-sharp fangs drives me on. Finally, my feet touch the rocky bottom. I scramble up the muddy bank, slipping and sliding in my haste. As I pull myself onto solid ground, I hear it. The sound of heavy paws pounding the earth, racing along the riverbank. It's found me. There's no time to catch my breath. No time to think. I break into a desperate run, crashing through the undergrowth. Branches whip at my face, leaving stinging cuts, but I barely notice. All that matters is putting distance between myself and the monster at my heels. "Help!" I scream, knowing it's futile. There's no one out here to hear me, no one to come to my rescue. I'm alone with this nightmare, and my own 2 feet are my only hope for survival. The forest seems to close in around me, the trees looming like silent sentinels in the darkness. Moonlight filters weakly through the canopy, casting everything in an eerie, silvery glow. Shadows dance and twist, playing tricks on my panicked mind. Every rustle of leaves becomes the beast's approach, every snapping twig its gnashing teeth. I risk a glance over my shoulder, and immediately wish I hadn't. The creature is there. A massive, dark shape bounding through the forest with unnatural grace and speed. Its eyes gleam with predatory hunger, fixed squarely on me. Hot breath washes over the back of my neck, telling me the monster is gaining ground with inhuman speed. The realization sends a fresh surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I push myself harder, my legs pumping furiously as I weave between the trees. This can't be happening, I gasp between ragged breaths. Wake up, wake up, wake up. But this is no dream I can shake myself from. The burning in my lungs, the sting of branches lashing my skin, the thunderous pounding of my heart. It's all terrifyingly real. A fallen log looms in my path. I leap over it, my foot catching the edge. For a heart-stopping moment, I think I'm going to fall, but I manage to keep my balance, stumbling forward without breaking stride. The beast isn't so lucky. I hear a crash and a yelp of surprise as it collides with the obstacle. A fleeting spark of hope ignites in my chest. Maybe I can outmaneuver it, use the terrain to my advantage. That hope is short-lived. A terrifying howl pierces the air, closer than before. The sound sends ice through my veins, spurring me to push my burning muscles even harder. The creature's frustration is palpable. Its hunger a living thing that seems to permeate the very air around me. I have no idea where I'm going, no plan beyond away. The logical part of my brain knows I can't keep this pace up forever. Already my steps are becoming less sure, my breathing more labored. But stopping means death, so I press on. The forest floor becomes steeper, the ground rockier. I'm climbing now, scrambling up an incline that grows more treacherous with each step. Loose stones shift under my feet, threatening to send me tumbling back down into the waiting jaws of the beast. "Come on," I mutter through gritted teeth. "Come on, come on, come on." I crest the top of the hill, allowing myself a moment's pause to scan my surroundings. In the distance, I spot a break in the trees. A clearing, maybe? It's my only option. I set off toward it, my legs feeling like lead weights. The sound of pursuit grows louder behind me. The creature is undeterred by the difficult terrain, its powerful limbs eating up the distance between us. I can hear its labored breathing, the snap of its jaws as it lunges for me and falls just short. Panic claws at my throat. I'm not going to make it, it's too fast, too strong. My foot catches on an exposed root, and suddenly the world is tilting. I stumble, arms windmilling as I try to regain my balance. Too late. I sprawl face first into the leaf litter, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. For a moment I lie there, dazed and gasping. Then the reality of my situation comes crashing back, and terror grips me anew. I scramble to my feet, heart pounding so hard I think it might burst from my chest. The beast is upon me, its massive form blocking out the moonlight. I can smell its fetid breath, feel the heat radiating from its body. Time seems to slow as I turn to face my pursuer. The creature towers over me, easily 7 feet tall on its hind legs. Saliva drips from yellowed fangs, each as long as my finger. Its eyes burn with an unholy hunger, fixed squarely on me. This is it, I think. This is how I die. But some primal instinct for survival takes over. As the beast lunges for me, jaws gaping wide, I throw myself to the side. I feel the rush of air as its teeth snap shut mere inches from my face. The momentum of its attack carries the creature past me. I seize the opportunity, scrambling to my feet once more. The clearing I spotted earlier is just ahead, tantalizingly close. With a final burst of desperate energy, I sprint toward the open space. Behind me, I hear the monster recovering, its snarls of frustration turning to growls of renewed pursuit. I break through the tree line, my eyes darting frantically for any sign of shelter or salvation. And there, silhouetted against the star-studded sky, I see it. A cabin. Old and decrepit, but solid. A potential refuge. Hope surges through me, giving new strength to my trembling limbs. I race toward the structure, the sound of pounding paws spurring me on. Just a little further, just a few more steps. The cabin looms before me, a dark sentinel in the night. As I reach for the door, I allow myself to think that maybe, just maybe, I might survive this nightmare after all. But the night is far from over, and the beast's hungry howl reminds me that this chase is not yet done. My hand closes on the door handle and I pray it will open. Pray this flimsy wooden structure will be enough to keep the nightmare at bay. My hand closes around the cabin's door handle, hope surging through me. But as I yank on it, my heart plummets. It's locked. I rattle the handle frantically, panic rising in my throat. No, 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 I cry out, my voice breaking. Please, God, open. Behind me, I hear the creature crashing through the underbrush. Massive paws thud against the earth, mere feet away now. I spin around, my back pressed against the unyielding door, and for the first time I get a clear view of my pursuer in the moonlit clearing. The sight before me defies explanation, a nightmare given flesh. It's a wolf, but grotesquely wrong. Easily 7 feet tall at the shoulder, with limbs too long and articulated to be natural. Muscles ripple beneath matted fur, and wickedly curved claws gouge the earth with each step. But it's the creature's face that freezes the blood in my veins. The muzzle is elongated, filled with yellowed fangs that gleam in the moonlight. And the eyes, dear God, the eyes. They burn with an intelligence that has no place in an animal, an unholy hunger that goes beyond mere predatory instinct. For a heartbeat that seems to stretch into eternity, we stare at each other across the clearing. Then, with a bone-chilling howl, the beast lunges. Time slows to a crawl. I see every detail with horrifying clarity. The bunching of muscles as it leaps, the spray of saliva from its open jaws, the glint of moonlight on razor-sharp claws. In that moment, I'm certain I'm about to die. But some primal instinct takes over. At the last possible second, I throw myself to the side. I feel the rush of air as the creature hurtles past, its claws grazing my back. There's a tearing sound as my jacket shreds, followed by a stinging pain that tells me those claws found flesh as well. I hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from my lungs, but there's no time to recover. I rolled desperately just as massive jaws snap shut where my head had been a split second before. The beast's fetid breath washes over me, hot and rank with the smell of decay. Scrambling to my feet, I dart around the side of the cabin. My mind races, searching for options. I can't outrun this thing. I can't fight it. My only hope is to find some kind of shelter, something solid between me and those teeth and claws. As I round the corner of the cabin, I spot a window. It's boarded up, but the planks look old and weathered. It's my only chance. With a burst of adrenaline I didn't know I had left, I bolt towards the window. Behind me, I hear the creature recovering, its snarls of frustration turning to growls of renewed pursuit. Come on, I mutter, reaching the window. I grab one of the boards, ignoring the splinters that immediately dig into my palms. With a strength born of desperation, I pull. The board creaks, then gives way with a sudden crack. I toss it aside and reach for the next one. A howl splits the night, closer than ever. I don't dare look back, focusing all my energy on the task at hand. Another board comes free, then another. Just as I pull the last plank away, I hear the thud of heavy paws directly behind me. Hot breath washes over the back of my neck. There's no time to think. I dive through the window head first, feeling glass shatter around me as I crash through the remaining pane. I hit the cabin floor hard, rolling to disperse the impact. For a moment I lie there, dazed and gasping. Then a snarl from outside snaps me back to reality. I scramble to my feet, eyes darting around the cabin's interior. It's a single room, sparsely furnished with a few pieces of broken furniture. Moonlight streams in through the now open window, casting long shadows across the floor. In one corner, I spot a heavy wooden wardrobe. Without hesitation, I race towards it. Outside, I hear the sound of claws scrabbling against the cabin's wooden walls. The window frame splinters as the creature tries to force its way through the too small opening. I reach the wardrobe and throw my weight against it. It's heavier than I expected, and for a heart-stopping moment I think I won't be able to move it. But with a scraping sound that seems deafeningly loud in the confined space, it starts to slide across the floor. Come on, damn you, I growl through gritted teeth, pushing with every ounce of strength I have left. Finally, the wardrobe settles into place in front of the window. Not a moment too soon. No sooner has it blocked the opening than something huge slams against it from outside. The impact shakes the entire cabin, and I stumble backward, falling onto my backside. For several terrifying seconds, the assault continues. The wardrobe shudders with each blow, and I can hear wood splintering. But miraculously, it holds. Then abruptly, the attack stops. In the sudden silence, I can hear my own ragged breathing, punctuated by the frantic pounding of my heart. Slowly, cautiously, I pull myself to my feet. My entire body aches, and now that the immediate danger has passed, I become aware of a burning pain across my back where the creature's claws caught me. I strain my ears, listening for any sound of the beast outside. There's nothing but the usual nighttime forest noises, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant hoot of an owl. Has it given up? Left to find easier prey? Somehow I don't think so. This thing, whatever it is, seems too intelligent, too determined to simply walk away. No, I have a sinking feeling that it's out there still, waiting, planning, and I'm trapped in here, with no food, no water, and no way to call for help. As the adrenaline begins to fade, exhaustion crashes over me in waves. I slump against the far wall, sliding down until I'm sitting on the dusty floor. My clothes are torn and soaked with sweat and river water. Blood trickles from numerous cuts and scratches. What the hell was that thing? I whisper to myself, my voice sounding small and frightened in the empty cabin. This can't be real, it can't be. But the pain in my back, the lingering scent of the creature's foul breath, the very real wooden walls around me, it all testifies to the reality of my situation. Whatever that thing is, however impossible it might seem, it's out there and it wants me dead. As the full weight of my predicament settles over me, I draw my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around them. All I can do now is wait and hope. Wait for dawn. Wait for the beast to leave. Wait for some miracle to deliver me from this nightmare. But deep down, a part of me knows this long, terrifying night is far from over. I slam the cabin door shut behind me, my heart pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. My hands shake uncontrollably as I fumble with the rusty bolt, desperately trying to slide it into place. Come on, I mutter, my voice barely above a whisper. The metal screeches in protest, years of disuse making it resistant to my efforts. Finally, with a grinding sound that seems deafeningly loud in the silence, the bolt slides home. For a moment, I lean against the door, gasping for breath. The cabin is dark, musty, and filled with shadows. Moonlight filters weakly through grimy windows, illuminating dust motes that dance in the air. The place smells of mold and decay, but right now it's the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. My relief is short-lived. A thunderous impact rocks the cabin, nearly knocking me off my feet. The walls shake as the creature hurls itself against the door. Wood splinters under its assault, and I stumble backward, eyes wide with terror. No, I whimper, watching as cracks begin to form in the weathered planks. The door won't hold for long against this onslaught. Panic surges through me, galvanizing me into action. I spin around, taking in the cabin's interior. It's a single room, sparsely furnished with rotting furniture. A sagging bed frame stands in one corner, a rickety table and chairs in another. Cobwebs drape every surface like gossamer curtains. Another bone-jarring impact. The door frame creaks ominously. Think, damn it, I hiss to myself. You've got to do something. My eyes land on the table. It's old and worm-eaten, but it's solid wood. Without hesitation, I lunge for it, grabbing one end and dragging it towards the door. The legs screech against the floor, leaving gouges in the wood. I wedge the table against the door just as another blow lands. The furniture shudders but holds. It won't be enough, though. Not nearly enough. Frantically, I start piling everything I can find against the windows and doors. The chairs join the table, then the bed frame. I tear rotting boards from the walls, adding them to my makeshift barricades. All the while, the creature continues its relentless assault. Each impact sends tremors through the cabin, each splintering crack of wood a death knell for my fragile sanctuary. Please hold, I pray, though to whom or what I'm not sure. Please just hold. As I drag a heavy trunk across the floor, a new sound freezes me in place. Claws, scraping against the outer walls. The beast is probing, searching for weaknesses. I picture those massive talons I glimpsed earlier, imagine them tearing through the aged wood like paper. My legs give out, and I collapse in a corner, drawing my knees up to my chest. I press my fists against my mouth, trying to stifle the sobs that threaten to escape. Tears stream down my face, cutting trails through the grime and sweat. This isn't happening, I whisper between ragged breaths. This can't be real. Wake up. Wake up. But I don't wake up. The nightmare continues, punctuated by the sounds of the creature's efforts to reach me. Growls of frustration, the splintering of wood, the scrape of claws seeking purchase. Time loses all meaning. It could be minutes or hours that pass as I huddle in my corner, every muscle tensed, waiting for the moment when my barricades finally give way. The darkness seems to press in on me, filled with imagined horrors. Every shadow becomes the beast, every creak of the settling cabin a prelude to its final assault. During a lull in the attack, I force myself to take stock of my situation. My clothes are torn and soaked, my body covered in cuts and bruises. The gashes on my back from the creature's claws throb with each heartbeat. I'm cold, exhausted, and terrified beyond anything I've ever experienced. Okay, I mutter to myself, needing to hear a human voice, even if it's my own. Okay, think. What do you know? I close my eyes, trying to organize my thoughts. There's something out there. Something impossible. A wolf, but wrong. Too big. Too smart. I shudder at the memory of those glowing eyes, filled with malevolent intelligence. It wants to kill me. Why? I don't know. But it's not giving up. A particularly loud growl from outside punctuates this thought, as if the creature is agreeing with my assessment. I'm trapped, I continue, my voice barely above a whisper. No food, no water, no way to call for help. I pat my pockets, already knowing what I'll find. Phone's gone. Must have lost it in the river. The river. It feels like a lifetime ago that I plunged into those icy waters, yet it can't have been more than a few hours. Has anyone noticed I'm missing yet? Will they come looking for me? A hysterical laugh bubbles up in my throat. Even if they do, what will they find? A crazed man babbling about monster wolves? They'll think I've lost my mind. Hell, maybe I have. Maybe this is all some vivid hallucination brought on by hypothermia or a head injury. But the pain is too real, the fear too visceral. This is happening, however impossible it might seem. As the night wears on, a new fear begins to gnaw at me. What happens when the sun rises? Will the creature leave unable to hunt in the daylight? Or will it simply redouble its efforts knowing its time is limited? And what about me? I can't stay in this cabin forever. Eventually I'll have to leave to find food and water to seek help. The thought of stepping back out into those woods, knowing what's waiting for me, sends a fresh wave of terror through my body. Hours pass in this terrified limbo. The creature's attacks come in waves, periods of frenzied activity followed by eerie silence. Each time it goes quiet, I wonder if it's finally given up. Each time it returns, my hope dies a little more. As the first hints of pre-dawn light begin to filter through the cracks in my barricades, I realize I've survived the night. But far from feeling relief, a new dread settles over me. Because now I have to face the day, and whatever it might bring. The beast's frustrated howl echoes through the forest, closer than ever. It knows as well as I do that time is running out. One way or another, this standoff will end soon. I push myself to my feet, legs shaky from hours of inactivity. My throat is parched, my stomach a hollow pit. But I'm alive. For now, that has to be enough. As I brace myself for whatever comes next, one thought burns in my mind. This isn't over, not by a long shot. As the first rays of sunlight filter through the cracks in my makeshift barricades, an eerie silence descends upon the cabin. The relentless attacks that have kept me on edge throughout the night suddenly cease. I hold my breath, straining my ears for any sound of the creature's presence. But there's nothing. No growls, no scratching, no thunderous impacts against the walls. For several long minutes I remain frozen in my corner, afraid to move or even breathe too loudly. Could it really be over? Or is this just another trick? The beast lying in wait for me to lower my guard? Slowly, painfully, I begin to uncurl from my hiding spot. My muscles scream in protest, stiff and sore from hours of tensed immobility. Every joint aches, and the cuts and bruises from my frantic flight through the forest throb with renewed intensity. I rise to my feet, wincing at the loud pop from my knees. The cabin looks different in the pale morning light, less of a sanctuary and more of a decrepit death trap. Dust motes dance in the sunbeams that penetrate the gloom, and I can now clearly see the extent of the damage from last night's assault. Deep gouges mar the walls and door, and splintered wood litters the floor. Cautiously, I approach one of the boarded-up windows. My heart races as I press my eye to a small gap between the planks. The forest outside looks peaceful, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Birds chirp merrily, and a gentle breeze rustles the leaves. It's a scene of tranquil beauty that stands in stark contrast to the horrors of the night. Is it really gone? I whisper to myself, hardly daring to believe it. With trembling hands, I begin to remove the barricade from the door. Each scrape of furniture across the floor makes me flinch, certain that at any moment the beast will return. but the silence holds. Finally, the door is clear. I stand before it, my hand on the rusty bolt paralyzed with indecision. Part of me wants to stay in this relative safety, to wait for rescue, but I know that's not an option. I need food, water, and medical attention. And more than anything, I need to get as far away from these woods as possible. Taking a deep breath, I slide back the bolt and crack open the door. Sunlight floods in, momentarily blinding me. I blink rapidly, my eyes adjusting to the brightness. The forest air feels crisp and clean after the musty confines of the cabin. Slowly, cautiously, I step outside. My eyes dart from tree to tree, scanning for any sign of movement. But the woods seem empty of threats, alive only with the normal sounds of nature. "Hello?" I call out, my voice hoarse and weak. "Is anyone there?" Only the echo of my own words answers me. I take a few more steps away from the cabin, my entire body tense and ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. But nothing happens. No monstrous wolf creature bursts from the underbrush. No glowing eyes peer at me from the shadows. As I turn back to survey the cabin in the daylight, something catches my eye. There, in a patch of soft mud near the base of the wall, is a print. My blood runs cold as I crouch down to examine it. It's a paw print, but like nothing I've ever seen before. Massive, easily the size of a dinner plate, with deep impressions where wickedly curved claws dug into the earth. A chill runs down my spine as I realize this is undeniable proof. Last night's terror was real. "Jesus," I mutter, running a shaking hand through my hair. What the hell was that thing? I stand up, suddenly feeling exposed. The peaceful morning scene now seems like a thin veneer, barely concealing the dangers I know lurk in these woods. I need to get out of here, and fast. Quickly, I re-enter the cabin and gather what few useful items I can find. An old blanket that I tear into strips to bind my wounds. A rusty hatchet that I hope will serve as both tool and weapon if needed. There's no food or water, but I do find an ancient map tacked to one wall. It's faded and yellowed, but I can make out enough landmarks to get a rough idea of where I am. As I step back outside, a plan begins to form in my mind. If I'm reading the map correctly, there should be a ranger station about 5 miles to the east. It's my best chance for rescue and my only hope of convincing anyone about what happened here. I set off at a brisk pace, my eyes constantly scanning my surroundings. Every snapping twig makes me jump. Every rustle of leaves sends my heart racing. The forest that had seemed so inviting yesterday now feels oppressive, full of hidden dangers. As I walk, I try to make sense of what happened. "Okay," I mutter to myself, needing to hear a human voice. "Let's think this through. What did you actually see?" I picture the creature in my mind. Its massive size, the glowing eyes, the impossible speed and strength. "A wolf," I say. "But not a wolf. Too big. Too smart." I shake my head. "A werewolf? No, that's crazy. Those don't exist." But the image of those paw prints in the mud rises unbidden in my mind. Whatever attacked me was real, no matter how impossible it might seem. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the heat becomes oppressive. My throat is parched, my stomach a hollow pit. The cuts on my back sting with sweat, and I worry about infection. But I push on, driven by the need to put as much distance between myself and the site of last night's attack as possible. Hours pass, and I begin to fear I've somehow gone off course. The ranger station should have appeared by now. Doubt creeps in. What if I read the map wrong? What if I'm just walking deeper into the wilderness, farther from any hope of rescue? Just as despair threatens to overwhelm me, I spot something through the trees, a glint of metal. My heart leaps. Could it be? I quicken my pace, ignoring the protests of my aching body. As I draw closer, the shape resolves itself into a small building with a radio antenna on the roof. The ranger station. Relief floods through me, bringing with it a wave of exhaustion. I've made it. I'm safe. Now I just need to convince someone of what happened. to make them believe the unbelievable. As I approach the station, rehearsing in my head how to explain my wild tale, a new fear takes hold. What if they don't believe me? What if they dismiss my story as the ravings of a man driven mad by fear and exposure? Worse still, what if they do believe me? What if that thing is still out there, still hunting? With these troubling thoughts swirling in my mind, I reach for the station's door, steeling myself for whatever comes next. The ranger station door creaks open, and I stumble inside, exhausted and disheveled. The lone ranger on duty, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, looks up from his desk with surprise. "Jesus, son, what happened to you?" he exclaims, rushing to my side. I open my mouth to explain, but the words catch in my throat. How can I possibly describe what I've been through? Instead, I croak out, "Water, please." He nods, guiding me to a chair before fetching a bottle of water. As I gulp it down greedily, he radios for medical assistance. The cool liquid revives me somewhat, and I manage to give him a sanitized version of events. Got lost, fell in the river, spent the night in an abandoned cabin. I leave out any mention of the creature. Even in my addled state, I know how insane it would sound. The ranger, whose name tag reads Mike, listens sympathetically. "You're lucky to be alive," he says, shaking his head. "These woods can be dangerous if you're not prepared." You have no idea, I think to myself. After what feels like an eternity but is probably only about an hour, a park medic arrives. She cleans and bandages my wounds, paying particular attention to the deep scratches on my back. "These look like animal claw marks," she remarks, frowning. "Did you have an encounter with a bear?" I tense up, unsure how to respond. I'm not sure what it was," I stammer. "It was dark and everything happened so fast." She exchanges a glance with Mike but doesn't press the issue. Instead, she gives me some antibiotics and advises me to see a doctor for a follow-up. As the adrenaline fades and the reality of my survival sets in, exhaustion threatens to overwhelm me. But I can't rest, not here, not so close to those woods. "I need to get back to my car," I tell Mike, struggling to my feet. He looks concerned. "Are you sure you're up for that? We can arrange for someone to drive you." "No," I cut him off, perhaps too sharply. "No, thank you. I need to do this myself." Mike hesitates, then nods. "All right. But take this." He hands me a handheld radio. "Check in every half hour on your way back. If we don't hear from you, we'll send someone after you." I take the radio, grateful for the lifeline it represents. With directions to the nearest trailhead and my car, I set off. The forest that had seemed so inviting just yesterday now feels oppressive and alien. Every shadow conceals potential threats, every rustle of leaves sends my heart racing. I can't shake the feeling of being watched, unseen eyes following my every move. I quicken my pace, wincing at the pain from my various injuries. The rational part of my brain tells me I'm safe now, that the creature, whatever it was, is long gone. But a primal fear has taken root in my psyche, one that won't be easily dislodged. A twig snaps somewhere to my left, and I nearly jump out of my skin. I whirl around, eyes wide, searching for the source of the sound. There's nothing there, just the endless sea of trees and undergrowth. "Get a grip," I mutter to myself, trying to slow my racing heart. It's just the wind, or a squirrel, or literally anything other than a giant wolf monster. But my body refuses to relax. Every sense is on high alert, attuned to the slightest hint of danger. I find myself checking in with Mike more frequently than the agreed-upon half hour, just to hear another human voice. As I walk, my mind keeps replaying the events of the past night. The chase through the dark woods, the creature's glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws, the hours of terror in that decrepit cabin. It all seems like a nightmare, something that couldn't possibly have happened in the real world. Yet the pain in my body, the torn clothes, and the vivid memories tell me otherwise. Whatever I encountered was real, no matter how impossible it might seem. After what feels like an eternity, I finally spot something through the trees, the glint of metal. My car. Relief floods through me and I break into a run, ignoring the protests of my battered body. As I burst out of the tree line into the small parking area, I half expect to see the creature waiting for me. But there's nothing. Just my dusty sedan sitting exactly where I left it, looking almost comically ordinary after everything I've been through. My hands shake as I fumble with the keys, dropping them twice before managing to unlock the door. I practically dive into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind me and hitting the lock button repeatedly. For a long moment, I just sit there, breathing heavily, my forehead resting on the steering wheel. I've made it. I'm safe. But as I lift my head and look out at the forest surrounding the parking lot, a chill runs down my spine. The trees seem to loom ominously, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. And somewhere in those woods, I know, something unnatural and terrifying lurks. With shaking hands, I start the engine. The familiar rumble is comforting, a reminder of the normal world I'm about to return to. I put the car in reverse, then pause. I should call Mike, let him know I've made it safely to my vehicle. I reach for the radio, but something stops me. What if, in explaining where I am, I give away my location to something else? Something that might be listening? Paranoia wins out. I toss the radio onto the passenger seat and slam my foot on the gas pedal. The tires squeal as I peel out of the parking lot, gravel spraying behind me. As I speed down the winding forest road, my eyes dart constantly to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a monstrous shape bounding after me. But there's nothing, just the road and the ever-receding line of trees. Only when I finally reach the main highway joining the steady stream of normal traffic do I allow myself to relax slightly. I've escaped. I've survived. But as the miles roll by and civilization slowly returns, a new fear begins to gnaw at me. What do I do now? Who can I tell about what happened? Who would even believe me? And more importantly, what if that thing, that impossible creature, decides it's not done with me yet? As I drive on, putting distance between myself and those haunted woods, I can't shake the feeling that this nightmare is far from over. That somehow, some way, our paths will cross again. And next time I might not be so lucky. The fluorescent lights of the sheriff's office buzz incessantly, their harsh glare making me squint. I'm seated across from Sheriff Hank Dawson, a grizzled man in his late 50s with a perpetual frown etched into his weathered face. My clothes are still dirty and torn, and I can feel the grime of the forest clinging to my skin. So, let me get this straight, Sheriff Dawson drawls, leaning back in his creaking chair. You're saying a giant wolf creature chased you through the woods, trapped you in a cabin, and tried to eat you? I nod, my throat dry. I know how it sounds, Sheriff, but I swear to you, it's the truth. The sheriff's eyes narrow with skepticism. Son, I've been patrolling these woods for 30 years. We got bears, we got mountain lions, but we sure as hell don't have no werewolves. I didn't say it was a werewolf, I protest weakly, though the thought had crossed my mind. I'm just telling you what I saw. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall when it stood on its hind legs. And its eyes, they glowed in the dark. Sheriff Dawson sighs, rubbing his temples. Listen, kid, I get it. You had a scare out there. The woods can play tricks on your mind, especially at night. But werewolves ain't real. You probably saw a bear and your imagination did the rest. My heart sinks as I realize he doesn't believe a word I'm saying. But the claw marks on my back could be from any number of critters, he interrupts, or from you thrashing around in the underbrush. Point is, there's no monster out there, just a city boy who got in over his head. I slump in my chair, deflated. Without proof, my story sounds insane even to my own ears. How can I convince anyone of what I experienced? The sheriff stands up, signaling the end of our conversation. Why don't you head over to the ER, get those cuts looked at? And next time you decide to go hiking, stick to the marked trails. I nod numbly, recognizing the dismissal for what it is. As I reach the door, Sheriff Dawson calls out, "Oh, and son, Maybe ease up on the late-night horror movies, yeah? The comment stings, but I don't bother responding. What's the point? An hour later, I'm seated on an examination table in the local emergency room. The doctor, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, gently cleans the cuts on my arms and face. "These don't look too bad," she says reassuringly. "But I am concerned about the scratches on your back. They're quite deep." I tense up. "Can you tell what caused them?" She hesitates. "Well, they're consistent with an animal attack. A large predator, possibly a bear or mountain lion. You're lucky they're not worse." "It wasn't a bear," I mutter, wincing as she applies antiseptic. The doctor gives me a sympathetic look. "I understand you've been through a traumatic experience. It's not uncommon for the mind to embellish details in times of stress. The important thing is you survived." I want to argue to make her understand that this wasn't just some random animal encounter. But I can see the doubt in her eyes, the same look the sheriff gave me. They think I'm crazy or at best severely mistaken about what happened. "I'm going to give you a prescription for antibiotics," the doctor continues, scribbling on a pad. "And I'd like you to follow up with your regular physician in a few days. Oh, and here's the number for a counselor who specializes in trauma. It might help to talk to someone about what you went through." I take the prescriptions and referral, mumbling my thanks. As I leave the ER, I feel a profound sense of isolation. I know what I saw, what I experienced. But without evidence, it's just my word against common sense and rationality. The sun is setting as I check into a small motel on the outskirts of town. The elderly woman at the front desk eyes my disheveled appearance warily, but doesn't comment as she hands over the room key. Once inside, I immediately draw the curtains and turn on every light. The room is small and dated, with faded floral wallpaper and a musty smell. But right now it feels like a fortress compared to that cabin in the woods. I take a long, hot shower, watching as dirt and dried blood swirl down the drain. The warm water stings my cuts, a sharp reminder that everything that happened was very, very real. After drying off and changing into clean clothes, I sit on the edge of the bed staring at nothing. The events of the past 24 hours play on a loop in my mind. The chase through the dark forest, the creature's glowing eyes, the hours of terror in that abandoned cabin. It all seems like a nightmare, but the pain in my body and the vivid memories tell me otherwise. As night falls, a new wave of anxiety washes over me. I get up and triple-check the locks on the door, then wedge a chair under the handle for good measure. I can't shake the feeling of vulnerability, imagining those razor-sharp claws tearing through the flimsy motel walls. "Get a grip," I mutter to myself, pacing the small room. "You're miles away from those woods. It can't find you here." But even as I say the words, I don't fully believe them. Whatever that creature was, it seemed intelligent, determined. What if it tracked me here? What if it's out there right now, watching, waiting? I pull back the curtain a fraction, peering out into the darkness. The parking lot is empty save for a few cars, dimly illuminated by flickering streetlights. Nothing moves in the shadows. Letting the curtain fall back into place, I sink onto the bed, my head in my hands. I'm exhausted, both physically and mentally. But I know sleep won't come easy tonight. Not with the memory of that beast so fresh in my mind. As I lie back on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, a chilling thought occurs to me. Tonight is another full moon. If that thing really was some kind of werewolf, does that mean it's still out there, still in its monstrous form? I shake my head, trying to dismiss the idea. Werewolves aren't real. They can't be. And yet, the image of those glowing eyes and savage claws is burned into my memory. Real or not, one thing is certain. I'll never look at the full moon the same way again. As exhaustion finally begins to overtake me, I make a silent vow. I'll find a way to prove what happened, to make people believe me. Because if I don't, if that thing is still out there, then God help us all. The motel room feels like it's closing in on me. The shadows cast by the dim bedside lamp seemed to writhe and twist, taking on monstrous shapes. Every creak of the old building, every muffled sound from neighboring rooms sets my nerves on edge. I sit bolt upright in bed, my back pressed against the headboard, eyes darting from corner to corner. My heart races, and a cold sweat breaks out on my forehead. Logically, I know I'm safe here. The creature, whatever it was, is miles away in the forest. But logic has little sway over the primal fear that's taken root in my mind. Get it together, I mutter to myself, running a shaky hand through my hair. You're safe. It can't get you here. But even as I say the words, I don't believe them. The memory of those glowing eyes, those razor-sharp claws is too vivid. I close my eyes trying to calm myself, but that only makes it worse. The attack plays out in my mind on an endless loop. The chase through the dark woods, the creature's hot breath on my neck, the splintering of wood as it tried to break into the cabin. Sleep is impossible. Every time I start to drift off, I jerk awake, certain I've heard the scratch of claws on the window or the low growl of an inhuman throat. The digital clock on the nightstand seems to mock me, its red numbers crawling forward with agonizing slowness. 2:17 a.m., 3:42 a.m., 4:05 a.m. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls. The sound sends me into a full-blown panic attack. My chest tightens, and I can't seem to draw a full breath. The room spins around me as I scramble out of bed, nearly falling in my haste to check the locks on the door and windows. It's just a dog. I try to reassure myself, my voice trembling. Just a normal, everyday dog. Not that thing. But the rational part of my brain is drowning in a sea of terror. What if it wasn't a dog? What if the creature has tracked me here? What if it's out there right now, circling the motel, looking for a way in? I grab my laptop with shaking hands, desperate for some kind of distraction. Without really thinking about it, I find myself typing werewolf into the search bar. The results are a mix of movie references, folklore, and conspiracy theories. I click link after link, scrolling through pages of information, looking for something, anything, that might explain what I encountered. Most of it is clearly fiction or superstition. Silver bullets, full moon transformations, wolfsbane. It all seems ridiculous in the harsh light of my laptop screen. But then I stumble across an obscure forum thread discussing cryptid sightings in the very forest I had been hiking in. My breath catches as I read an account that sounds eerily similar to my own experience. I was camping in the Adirondacks last summer, the post reads. Middle of the night, I heard something big moving around outside my tent. When I looked out, I saw these glowing eyes staring back at me. Whatever it was huge, way bigger than any wolf or bear I've ever seen. It stood up on its hind legs, and I swear it looked almost human for a second. Then it let out this howl that made my blood run cold. I've never packed up camp so fast in my life. I read the post over and over, my heart pounding. Could it be? Had someone else encountered the same creature? The thread devolves into arguments and skepticism, with most posters dismissing the story as a hoax or a misidentified bear sighting. But I know better. I know what I saw. Hours pass as I fall down a rabbit hole of cryptozoology websites and folklore archives. Most of it is clearly nonsense, but here and there, I find accounts that resonate with my experience. Stories of unnaturally large, wolf-like creatures with near-human intelligence. Sightings of beasts that seem to vanish without a trace, leaving no evidence behind. As I read, a horrifying thought occurs to me. What if this thing, whatever it is, isn't confined to that one forest? What if there are more of them out there? The first rays of dawn are starting to peek through the curtains when I finally look up from my laptop. My eyes burn from staring at the screen for hours, and my head throbs with a mix of exhaustion and information overload. I stretch, wincing at the pull of scabs on my back where the creature's claws had grazed me. As I stand to draw the curtains, hoping some sunlight will chase away the lingering shadows of the night, A calendar hanging on the wall catches my eye. My blood runs cold as I realize the date. Tonight is another full moon. No, I whisper, stumbling back from the window. No, no, no. Rationally, I know that even if werewolves were real, which they can't be, they just can't. I'm far from the forest where I encountered the creature. But rationality has little place in my mind right now. All I can think about is that beast, transformed once again by the light of the full moon, prowling the night in search of prey, in search of me. I sink to the floor, my back against the bed, and bury my face in my hands. I'm exhausted, terrified, and more alone than I've ever felt in my life. No one believes my story. I have no proof of what happened. And now, facing another night of that creature potentially being at full strength, I feel utterly helpless. But as the sun climbs higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the motel room floor, a new thought begins to take shape in my mind. If no one will believe me without evidence, then I'll just have to find some. I'll have to go back. The very idea sends a shiver of fear down my spine. But what choice do I have? I can't live like this, jumping at every shadow, doubting my own sanity. I need answers. I need proof. As I start to plan my return to those haunted woods, a part of me wonders if I'm making a terrible mistake. But the need to understand, to validate my experience, outweighs my fear. Tonight, under the light of another full moon, I'll face my nightmares head on. One way or another, I'll find the truth about what's lurking in those forests. God help me. The steering wheel feels slick beneath my sweaty palms as I guide my car along the winding forest road. Every fiber of my being screams at me to turn back, to flee as far from these woods as possible. But I can't. Not without proof. I park at the now familiar trailhead, my heart hammering against my ribs. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the ground and a cool breeze rustles the leaves. It all seems so normal, so peaceful, but I know better. You can do this, I mutter to myself as I check my backpack one last time. Camera? Check. Flashlight? Check. First aid kit? Water? Energy bars? All accounted for. As I step onto the trail, a memory flashes unbidden. The terror of that night, running blindly through the darkness with death snapping at my heels. I shake my head, trying to dispel the image. I'm here for answers, not to relive nightmares. The forest seems different in the daylight. Birds chirp merrily, squirrels chatter as they scamper up trees. But with each step deeper into the woods, my anxiety grows. Every snapping twig makes me flinch. Every rustle in the underbrush sends my heart racing. I pause frequently to take photos of the trail, of animal tracks, of anything that might corroborate my story. But it all looks so ordinary through the camera lens. How can I capture the horror of what I experienced? After what feels like hours of hiking, I spot a familiar clearing ahead. My breath catches in my throat as I step out of the tree line. There, looking somehow smaller and less ominous in the fading daylight, stands the cabin. Approaching cautiously, I examine the exterior. The door hangs slightly askew on its hinges, and deep gouges mar the wooden walls. But as I run my fingers over the marks, my heart sinks. They could easily be explained away as normal wear and tear, or damage from bears or other wildlife. Inside the cabin as much as I remember it, dusty, cobweb-covered, filled with broken furniture. But any evidence of my frantic barricading has been cleared away. I take photo after photo, but I know they prove nothing. As I step back outside, I notice dark clouds gathering on the horizon. A distant rumble of thunder reaches my ears. Great, I mutter. Just what I need. I decide to make one last sweep of the surrounding area before heading back. But as I push deeper into the forest, searching for any sign of the creature's presence, I lose track of time. The storm moves in faster than expected, and soon fat raindrops are pelting through the canopy. By the time I realize how late it's gotten, the sun is dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in ominous shades of red and purple. Panic grips me as I fumble for my flashlight. I've stayed too long. I'm trapped in the beast's hunting grounds as night falls. Stupid, 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 I berate myself as I start jogging back toward the trail. But in the gathering gloom, everything looks different. Trees loom menacingly. Shadows seem to move of their own accord. Am I even going the right way? The beam of my flashlight bounces erratically as I run, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The rain has soaked through my clothes and I shiver uncontrollably. But it's not just the cold that makes me tremble. A twig snaps loudly somewhere to my left. I whirl, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing, just endless trees and underbrush. "Hello?" I call out, my voice shaky. "Is someone there?" Only the patter of rain and the rumble of distant thunder answer me. I turn to continue on, and that's when I hear it. A low, guttural growl that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My blood runs cold. No, it can't be. Not again. I break into a full sprint, no longer caring about direction, focused only on putting distance between myself and that sound. Branches whip at my face, thorns tear at my clothes, but I barely notice. All that matters is escape. Suddenly, the ground disappears beneath my feet. I tumble down a steep embankment, rolling and sliding through mud and wet leaves. When I finally come to a stop at the bottom, I lie there for a moment, dazed and winded. As I struggle to my feet, spitting out dirt and leaves, I realize I've lost my flashlight in the fall. The darkness presses in around me, absolute and terrifying. I fumble for my phone, but the screen remains stubbornly dark. The fall must have damaged it. "Okay," I whisper to myself, trying to slow my racing heart. "Okay, think. Which way is the trail?" But as I stand there, disoriented and afraid, a sound cuts through the night that turns my blood to ice. A howl, long, mournful, and utterly inhuman, echoes through the trees. It's close. Too close. My legs move of their own accord, propelling me through the forest. I have no idea where I'm going, no plan beyond blind flight. Branches claw at my face, roots seem to reach up to trip me, but I push on. The howl comes again, closer this time. I risk a glance over my shoulder and immediately wish I hadn't. There, in the darkness behind me, 2 pinpoints of greenish light gleam. Eyes. Watching. Hunting. "No," I gasp, redoubling my pace. "No, please, no." But even as I run, I know it's futile. The creature is too fast, too strong, and I'm lost, alone, in its domain. As I burst through a thick stand of bushes, I find myself in a small clearing. Moonlight filters through a break in the clouds, illuminating a scene straight out of a nightmare. There, not 20 yards away, stands the beast. It's even larger than I remember, easily 7 feet tall on its hind legs. Matted fur covers its muscular body, and wicked claws extend from massive paws. But it's the face that stops my heart, a grotesque blend of wolf and human features with glowing eyes that burn with predatory intelligence. For a moment that stretches into eternity, we stare at each other across the clearing. Then, with a snarl that sends shivers down my spine, the creature drops to all fours and charges. I turn to run, knowing it's hopeless, but unable to do anything else. As the sound of pounding paws grows louder behind me, one thought burns in my mind. I never should have come back to these woods. My heart pounds in my chest, each beat a thunderous reminder that I'm still alive. For now. The forest around me blurs into a dark, menacing mass as I sprint towards my car. I can hear it behind me, the heavy, rhythmic thuds of massive paws striking the earth, drawing closer with each passing second. The stench of wet fur and something unmistakably feral fills my nostrils, spurring me to run faster than I ever thought possible. Come on, I mutter through gritted teeth, fumbling with my keys as I approach the vehicle. My fingers, slick with sweat and trembling from adrenaline, betray me at the worst possible moment. The keys slip from my grasp, landing with a mocking jingle on the gravel at my feet. "No," I cry out, desperation clawing at my throat. I can feel the creature's hot breath on the back of my neck as I bend to scoop up the keys. In that split second, I know I've made a fatal mistake. Time seems to slow as I straighten up, my hand reaching for the door handle. A deafening roar fills the air, and I feel more than see the massive form lunging towards me. I throw myself into the car, slamming the door shut just as an enormous clawed hand rakes across the metal. The screech of tearing steel sends shivers down my spine, and I stare in horror at the deep gouges left in the door, mere inches from where my body sits. "Start, damn you," I scream, jamming the key into the ignition and twisting with all my might. The engine roars to life, but before I can feel a moment of relief, the entire car rocks violently. The beast hurls itself against the side, its massive frame visible through the passenger window. Yellow eyes, filled with an inhuman hunger, lock onto mine. Teeth that would put a tiger to shame snap at the glass, leaving trails of saliva and fog on the window. I slam the gear shift into drive and floor the accelerator. The tires spin uselessly for a heart-stopping moment, kicking up gravel and dust. The werewolf, because what else could this nightmarish creature be, lets out another bone-chilling howl and rears back, preparing to smash through the window. Just as its claws descend, the tires find purchase. The car lurches forward, and I'm pressed back into my seat by the sudden acceleration. The monster's attack misses by mere centimeters, its claws scraping along the roof with a sound that sets my teeth on edge. I keep the pedal to the floor, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as I careen down the narrow forest road. Trees whip past in a dark blur, branches occasionally scraping against the sides of the car. My eyes dart frantically between the winding path ahead and the rearview mirror, searching for any sign of pursuit. For a moment, I think I've escaped. Then, in the mirror, I see them. 2 pinpricks of amber light reflecting in the darkness. The werewolf is still coming, its massive form eating up the distance between us with impossible speed. "No, no, no," I chant, willing the car to go faster. The engine whines in protest as I push it beyond its limits. The rough road jostles me in my seat, and I struggle to maintain control. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and I'll be at the mercy of that thing. As I take a sharp turn, my headlights illuminate a fallen tree blocking half the road. I have a split second to react. Jerking the wheel to the right, I feel the car tilt dangerously. For a terrifying moment, I'm sure we're going to roll. But somehow, miraculously, the tires grip the road once more, and I speed past the obstacle. I chance another glance in the rearview mirror, and my breath catches in my throat. The werewolf is there, closer than ever, its massive form sailing over the fallen tree with grotesque grace. In that brief moment, illuminated by my taillights, I see it in horrifying detail. The twisted fusion of man and wolf, rippling muscles covered in matted fur, elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Its muzzle is pulled back in a snarl, revealing rows of gleaming teeth. Our eyes meet once more, and I see something in its gaze that chills me to my core. There's hunger there, yes, but also intelligence. This isn't just some mindless beast. There's a calculating cruelty behind those eyes, a patient malevolence that tells me this chase is far from over. As if reading my thoughts, the werewolf suddenly veers off the road, disappearing into the dense forest. My initial relief is short-lived as I realize what it's doing. It's cutting through the woods, using its knowledge of the terrain to get ahead of me. Shit, I mutter, my eyes darting frantically between the road ahead and the dark forest to either side. Every shadow seems to move, every rustle of leaves sounds like the approach of my pursuer. The fear is paralyzing, but I force myself to focus on driving, knowing that one mistake could be my last. Suddenly, a massive form bursts from the tree line directly in front of me. The werewolf lands in the middle of the road, its hulking frame filling my windshield. I scream and instinctively jerk the wheel to the left. The car fishtails wildly, and I feel the sickening lurch as we leave the road entirely. Time seems to slow as the car plows through the underbrush. Branches whip against the windows, leaves and debris obscuring my view. I'm being thrown around inside the vehicle, my seatbelt the only thing keeping me from being ejected. Then, with a bone-jarring impact, The car slams to a halt against a large tree. For a moment, all is silent, except for the hissing of the damaged engine and my own ragged breathing. Dazed, I blink away the spots dancing in my vision and assess my situation. The airbag has deployed, leaving me with what I'm sure will be impressive bruises. I can taste blood in my mouth, and a sharp pain in my side suggests at least one broken rib. But I'm alive, and right now that's all that matters. Because I know it's still out there. As if summoned by my thoughts, I hear it. The slow, deliberate crunch of heavy footsteps on fallen leaves. My breath catches in my throat as a shadow falls across the cracked windshield. Slowly, terrifyingly, the werewolf's face comes into view. Its yellow eyes gleam with triumph as it regards me, trapped and helpless in the wreckage of my car. With agonizing slowness, it raises one massive paw, flexing claws that could easily tear through the already compromised glass. I close my eyes, bracing for the end, when suddenly, silence. When I dare to look again, the werewolf is gone. The forest around me is still. No sign of the nightmarish creature that had been moments away from claiming me as its prey. I strain my ears, listening for any sound of its presence. But there's nothing but the usual nighttime chorus of insects and the occasional hoot of an owl. Disbelief wars with relief as I slump back in my seat. I don't understand why it left, why I'm still breathing when by all rights I should be dead. But I'm not about to question my good fortune. With shaking hands, I unbuckle my seatbelt and force open the damaged driver's side door. As I stumble out of the wreckage, my legs nearly give out beneath me. The adrenaline is wearing off, leaving me acutely aware of every ache and pain. I lean against a nearby tree, gulping in deep breaths of the cool night air. That's when I see it. A single massive paw print in the soft earth near my feet. Concrete proof that I didn't imagine the whole terrifying encounter. But even as I stare at it, the imprint seems to blur and fade, as if the very forest is conspiring to erase all evidence of the werewolf's existence. I know, with a certainty that settles like lead in my stomach, that no one will ever believe what happened here tonight. The thought of trying to explain this to anyone, the police, doctors, even my closest friends, fills me with a fresh wave of dread. But those are concerns for later. Right now, I need to get help, to tend to my injuries and somehow make sense of what I've just lived through. With one last wary glance at the dark forest around me, I begin the long, painful walk back toward civilization, leaving behind the sight of a nightmare that I know will haunt me for the rest of my days.